Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Before we get into all of our topics today, quick reminder, if you're not doing so yet, please make sure you're subscribing to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. It's a great way to help out the show, as well as subscribe to the podcast feed over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And if you wouldn't mind while you're at it, take 20 seconds or so, toss us a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcast. Another great way to help out the show. And here's the cool thing. You can do both. You can subscribe on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast feed. We sure would appreciate it. We're trying to shed the label of the best kept secret in NBA. What is it? The potosphere or whatever we want to call it. We're trying to shed that label. Help us out and hit that subscribe button. Keith,
if you subscribe to both and we see you at Summer League in Las Vegas, I'll give you a hug. One free hug if you subscribe to both. But you have to prove it. So
I hope you have to give away a lot of hugs.
I hope so too. We might have to set up a booth in the concourse of Thomas and Mack and come get your free hug.
NBA front
or a handshake if you'd prefer that. I'm not going any further than a hug or a handshake. But you can.
We're going to be in Vegas, and instead of Front Office Fridays, our live show, it's going to be Free Hug Friday.
Yeah, there it is. Free Hug Fridays. I love it. Perfect. Yeah, well, and if you do subscribe and turn on notifications, you'll get notified on Friday when we're live for Front Office Friday. So I'm not going to yell here. I saved that for Friday.
That's right. And come in, you can ask us all the questions you want about the NBA, and I guess you can ask us about other stuff. I don't know if we're going to answer everything, but you can ask us questions. We go live on Fridays. All right, let's get into the news. First of all, some good news. Anthony Edwards, boy, it sure looked like he was going to be out for a long time with that ankle injury. He was in a walking boot. Fortunately, sounds like he's back. Going to be back. Karl-Anthony Towns as well, back soon. Perhaps even as soon as tomorrow. Could be back on Wednesday for the Wolves. The Wolves sure got a gutsy win last night, much to the chagrin of the Lakers. The Wolves pulled off a gutsy win. A shorthanded Wolves team had Taurean Prince go off, and now they're going to be getting back a lot of talent with Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah, no disrespect meant to Julius Randle and his great game, but Julius Randle's an all-star, all-NBA level guy, so you can, if you told me, hey, Julius Randle put up 50 plus points, I'd be like, all right, that's surprising, but not crazy. Taurean Prince going 12 for 13 and 8 for 8 from 3 in a game that was like, what happened here? Like,
right?
They turned on the make all shots button, I guess, for Taurean Prince. But yeah, huge for the Wolves here. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, he's basically their team leader now as far as everything he does for that team is being their offensive engine, but getting Cat back to is big. This gives them roughly 10-ish games to play with. I don't know exactly how many games they have left, so I should have looked. Okay, they've only got 9, but still 9 games to play with, 2.5 weeks or so to just kind of get it figured out. What does it look like with Cat and Gobert and, and Edwards and all those guys, and now Mike Conley. So this is where I think if you get all these guys back, this is where the Mike Conley addition is huge for Minnesota. Yeah. No disrespect meant to D'Angelo Russell, but he's just a very different player. He is a score first guy. That's what his role is. That's what his role was with the Wolves too. Conley's there he's going to make sure everybody eats, right? Everybody's going to get touches. He's going to make sure that everybody's getting shots and all those sorts of things. So, I don't know that this changes the fortunes for the Wolves as far as making a playoff run or anything like that, but it's obviously much better to have these guys than not to have them this late in the season.
Absolutely. Yeah, this gives them, I think, a chance to at least make some noise in the first round, certainly in the play-in, and perhaps build into next season as well. Get that really important postseason experience as a group here.
So let me ask you this: Minnesota, let's say they get to let's say they're the 6 or the 7 seed. What chances do you give them against Memphis or Sacramento in the first round?
Like 20%, 25%.
Yeah, I just think probably about where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say they don't have it. They've got a bunch of big wings. They've got plenty of length to defend a lot of different players. They can be super switchy. They've got guys who can get red hot on offense. So I like their team, but my concern would be you're trying to throw it all together last minute due to injury
Yeah.
with Towns, and that can be a lot, particularly when you're talking about two teams. Well, Jaw has been out recently, but they've spent most of the season with Jaw. I know they've been missing Steven Adams and stuff, but this Grizzlies team has been together for a while. And then
Mhm.
same thing with Sacramento. They've had most of the season to really develop that kind of chemistry. The Wolves are going to have to try to figure things out on the fly. I think that's the one of the differentiators there.
But I mean, 25% for a 6 or 7 seed, that's pretty
Oh,
good,
it's good.
right? That's
Yeah.
that's higher than we're normally going to be. So yeah, and that's not unique to Minnesota for me. I mean, obviously, I don't want to go through all of the possible playoff matchups right now. We will do a standings breakdown probably a little bit later this week, just to kind of reset with a couple weeks to go or so here. But I think that's going to be a lot in the West, right? Is going to be all right. Where did you land? It's interesting. I wish I could remember what it was. It might have been Zach Lowe's podcast. He was talking about how you might rather be in the the opposite side here if rather than getting into the 4-5 side with the Phoenix group, you might be
Hmm.
better off on the other side of that bracket, which is a little bit different, too. Normally you're trying to get as high as you can get, but Phoenix, Clippers, if that's the first round, then Denver, that's maybe the three best teams in the West, all in the same half of the bracket. That's kind of interesting. So West is, man, it's going to be crazy. I can't wait to get to those playoffs this year.
Well, and that's just it. You can say, well, you'd rather be in this bracket or that side of the bracket. It's so compact. There's no way to like try to
Yeah,
finagle your way into either because nobody like tomorrow it all could be completely different. There's no
yep.
way to know where
Yeah,
anything's
it's
going there.
I want to say it was Vince Goodwill of Yahoo Sports tweeted this out today, and he's spot on with it. Is we are sitting here 2.5 weeks out from the season ending, and 4 teams have been eliminated. 4. That's it. Now you
Crazy.
can functionally eliminate Orlando and Portland. I think that's probably fair at this point, but still, all these teams still alive with something to play for. And his point was the playing tournament success, 100% playing tournaments is a success. And we're seeing this year what the real intention is because you have a team. I'll use the Lakers as probably the best example, but there's a
Hmm.
number of teams in the West where the idea is, hey, our season has been garbage. The wheels fell off early. Now we're trying to rebound and we're trying to get there because we believe just get us in. Let us have a shot and we can play. Whereas in years past, this year's a little bit different in the Western Conference because it is, the Lakers are only a game and a half out of 6, a half game out of 8. But normally, if you're 11th, 12th in the conference, your season would have been over before the play-in tournament. Now you still have that path to get into the play-in tournament, and now we have a shot to maybe make some noise in the playoffs. And that's huge success to me.
Yeah, it's created a lot of scoreboard watching, certainly
Mhm.
around the league with all these teams that are in this race that is absolutely insane. Um, yeah, and who knows how it's going to fit? 10 games left for most of these teams. There's a few less for a few others, but yeah, we'll see ultimately
Yeah,
where this all
be a
goes.
lot of fun.
Yeah, should be. Well, stressful as hell. I
Yeah,
could say that. Like, oh my goodness, this is stressful.
yeah.
But
Stressful,
um,
but sometimes stress is fun.
yeah, it can be. It can be. If you get the result you want, then it's fun. Then it's fun. Um.
Yeah, what
Oh,
did we just
the
get
last
here?
2 minutes report.
Nope.
No.
Dillon Brooks
Oh, Dillon
suspension
Brooks
for the
suspended.
second. Hey, look at
That
that. We
is
can flow
actually
right into
perfect. That is perfect timing because that is actually my next topic. Dillon Brooks. So Keith and I were just getting the notification from the NBA that they are officially suspending Dillon Brooks due to technical fouls, just as we were getting to that topic on our list here. But Dillon Brooks says he needs to tone it down with technical fouls. He said money, it doesn't matter. It's just paper
it. Yeah.
because of the fines that he's been issued or whatever. But this is what I believe it's 18. Is that right?
Yeah,
18
this is his
techs
18th. So he's
on
now
the
into the
season.
every other technical. He's going to be suspended. So,
No,
no,
Shams is
it's just,
confirming that
yeah,
he's suspending.
yeah.
This is
Thanks. We
suspended.
saw it.
Shams is telling us what the NBA just told us.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody else is going to tag on in a minute here. Yeah. So Brooks already had a
Can
1 game
confirm.
suspension with his 16th, right?
Mhm.
And now he's into his 18th, and it's every other one from here on out for the rest of the regular season. That does reset when the postseason starts, and then it's seventh. On the seventh, you get suspended for a game. That's obviously, I think Draymond Green is still the only one to trigger a suspension in the playoffs, but that's where that's at. So yeah, I mean, and he said after the game he got this one because he was taunting Theo Pinson and was acting like kind of like an idiot a little bit during the game with going a little
What?
over the top. So, but it
No.
was like, yeah, right. Shocker. And this was after him and Kyrie had gone back and forth quite a bit throughout the course of the game. And then Dillon Brooks said after, he's like, yeah, I probably got to tone it down a little bit. I think he said something like, I got to get back into my mindfulness training or something like that. So we'll see, with him. But yeah, I mean, this is tough because he's a huge part of that team. He is by far and away their best wing defender
Mhm.
that they have, and they deploy him on really anybody 1 through 4 as long as they're kind of a perimeter-based ball handling, scoring type. Dillon Brooks is their best option to guard those guys, and he's you don't need to be playing a big game without Dillon Brooks down the stretch here because he was mouthing off to a bench player on the other team. Like that's it's one thing if you're getting into it in a game or you are fired up about a call or something, but just taunting technicals, those are the ones he needs to get
Mhm.
those out of the mix.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Especially if that becomes a big factor in the playoffs, because like you said, you're going to see like what if it's Memphis against the Clippers, and then suddenly you
Yeah.
don't have Dillon Brooks on Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. I mean,
Yep.
he's got to get that
When
figured out.
like if there's a chance they could play the Warriors in the first
Yeah,
round, and the Warriors kind of have a sense of like, all right, we can get at this guy a little bit, right?
yep.
And
They're going to
doing
try to
that.
get under
So
his skin.
yeah, so it's something he's just got to watch, right? Like, so let's just be smart about this, even though it resets in the playoffs. Like, let's just be let's be reasonable the rest of the way. I guess is the best way to put that.
All right. Speaking of the Grizzlies, John Morant will be back in action tomorrow night for the Grizz. Did not play last night. The Grizzlies did get a win over the Mavs. Tyus Jones is a tremendous backup
Mhm.
point, maybe the best backup point guard in the
I
NBA.
think so. Yeah.
So they are very capable, even when Ja is out. But of course, they want him out there. They need him out there, and this gives him enough time to get his legs under him again, get ramped up, and get back up to speed for the playoffs. So good timing here in that regard that he's not coming back with like a game or two left or anything. The Grizzlies get him back in the mix. And Keith, we've talked about what this means for his contract in terms of him making All NBA. Do you think this is early enough to get him back into that mix? And then what was it? 35 million could be on the line.
Yeah, I think it's 39 total in
39. That
his
sounds right.
yeah,
That sounds right.
in total between the two deals. But yeah, it's a big chunk of money. He's at 53 games played right now. So if you play the final 11 games, which all right, or even 10 of the final 11, you're now in range where I think the voters can say, okay, that's fair enough.
Mhm.
You missed almost 20 total games, but that's not unusual. Most people use a cutoff somewhere between 55 and 60 games, where if
Yeah.
you appear in less than that, and to be fair, and or be upfront, honest, transparent, whatever it is, there's no official line from the NBA on this. You
Right.
could vote a guy into plays one game if you really felt like it as a voter. Now they probably get major questions and might not have a
You
vote the next
Yeah, they
year,
wouldn't let you vote anymore.
but but there's no official hard and fast line. Why is it 55 that some use? That's roughly 2/3 of the season. Is the NBA season obviously at 82 doesn't break down evenly, but that's roughly 2/3 of the season. Some will say 60 because they think people just like round numbers, right? They're attracted to a round number, and that's all right. Well, you missed 22 games, not the end of the world. So if he plays them all and plays really well, and the Grizzlies win enough, and they right now they passed Sacramento last night because they won and the Kings lost. They stay the 2 seed. He probably does re-enter the mix to make All NBA. Now, some voters are going to hold it against him. What happened and what caused him to miss time? That's just the reality of it. It's how it
Mhm.
works. I don't think that's particularly fair necessarily because again, he didn't miss months of action, and it's as long as he's doing the right thing now, then what really matters is that in the combination of his play. But we're going to see, this is going to be a really interesting All NBA case, I think, for sure, because that guard line is so loaded this season.
Well, and that's just it. Is it's so easy to turn to someone else and have that
Mhm.
have what happened be essentially the tiebreaker,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So that's what's going to be interesting to watch and see how that vote
Exactly.
plays out. And again, it could be a lot of money on the line for John Morant.
And the
But
reason for that, just in case anybody's wondering, is because if he makes All NBA, he's eligible to get the so-called designated rookie extension, which would bump him a salary tier from 25% to 30%. So that's where that 39 million or so comes into play.
all right, let's jump over to your team, the Celtics. Jaylen Brown made some comments, sounded non-committal. He said a few things recently about
Mhm.
Boston and everything, and I'm sure this is something you've covered in depth. What is going on, and how are Celtics fans feeling about Jaylen Brown at this point?
Yeah, what's interesting is some of these interviews that he gave sound like he gave the interviews a couple months ago. And
Mm,
that is not uncommon for a reporter to come. They do a bunch of reporting, they'll do their interviews, and then they will build out their story, and then they may run it when all right, where our idea was to run this at the start of the playoffs or run it, at award season or whatever it is. And then there were two different articles that came out. One of them in the New York Times came out where Jaylen Brown basically said, "Yeah, some Celtics fans are toxic," and then he said, "Yeah, I've had issues with racism here in Boston. Like even though I'm Jaylen Brown of the Celtics, like there's been problems for me with different." Things where he's faced racist people and racist issues around the city, and that's not a surprise. I grew up there. I get it. I get where he's coming from with this, and I don't think he's by any means making it up or anything. And I know some people will say, "Well, that's every big city in America." Well, that to me, that's not an excuse, right? He lives in Boston now. He wants his adopted hometown to be better, right? And
mhm.
that's for other people like to throw around. It starts at home. Well, that's what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to start it at home and be better, in Boston. So that's one thing. Then in a interview with the Ringer, he was asked about basically about the Celtics and staying there long term, and he basically was like, "Yeah, it's not entirely up to me. It's up to them. It's up to how they treat me. It's up to all these different things." With that, and it was very much a not a yeah, I'm here. I'm a Celtic for life.
Right.
Now, to be fair, had he said, yes, I'm 100% re signing with the Celtics, a bunch of people were like, yeah, cool. Kyrie Irving told us that too. And then left, mere months later and left town. So there's going to be
Sure.
people who aren't going to believe anything these guys say one way or the other. So it's almost kind of a no win situation. And for all the people, because there's been a lot of people over the last couple of days who said, why didn't he just not answer? Like, just say, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm focused on the season, because not answering is an answer too. I think he was pretty honest and said, hey, there's a lot of things that are going to matter here. One of the things that's going to matter for Jaylen Brown is, does he make All NBA or not? If he makes All NBA, he is eligible for the what people call the Supermax, what's really called the Designated Veteran Extension. He can do that this summer if he makes All NBA this year. If he's a forward, and that's where most people vote him at, and that's where his votes come in, I think he has a pretty good chance of making it. I think not a lock
Mhm.
by any means, because I think some people are going to penalize guys like KD, LeBron, who normally would be locks for the amount of time they've missed. And they may say, I can't put them on the team because they've been out too long. So we'll see how that goes. Like kind of the same conversation we had about John Morant, right? There's no hard and fast rule, but a lot of people have their own kind of unofficial playing time. If he's on the guard line, that gets a lot tougher for him because it's just that guard line is so loaded, as we talked about. But if he makes it, they can offer him the Supermax right now, give him a 4-year extension for 35% of the cap, really put him in the upper echelon of paid players at his age and experience level, and that would be where it is. We've seen exactly one player say no, I don't really care about this new Supermax thing, and that was Kawhi. And he went to Toronto, and I think because Kawhi knew I'm going to get pretty close to that anyway, no matter where
Yeah.
I go, whatever happens. So that was the only guy so far to date that has turned it down. Everybody else, right? You and I talk about it all the time. Take my money, and then a year, 2 years, 3 years, I just say, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. Trade me, and
Yep.
that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I've talked about that ad nauseum here. The other option for the Celtics and Brown is obviously he is under contract for next season. So the other option would be you play it out if you make All NBA next season or win MVP or Defensive Player of the Year. But let's be real, All NBA is his path. Then he's eligible to sign a designated veteran contract. Wouldn't be an extension, but it'd be the contract. And then that could give him the 5-year, 35% max. So he jumps that salary tier. So he's still got a lot of options to go forward here. One of them that he's not going to do is a standard veteran extension right now because it's just too little money. It's a very small bump in pay over what he makes. He'd be leaving a ton of money on the table. We'll see if that gets changed enough in the CBA negotiations, because if it does, that changes this whole thing. And then, if that changes enough, I've got a whole bunch of writing to do. We've got a ton of podcasting to do because there's going to be a whole lot of guys in a different world than they're in right now today.
That's right. And that's something that we know that's been looked at because of situations like this, where teams they can't extend a guy who they would like to because of the restrictions. It just doesn't financially make sense for the player. So we'll see if the new CBA does change that, because that could change a lot of things. And I don't want to go down the whole rabbit hole right now. We'll have plenty of time for that, but like that could change the way free agency really is looked at around the NBA. If suddenly more players are signing extensions than there are right now, and even now, you look at a free agent class and you're like, oh, cool, there's that guy, that guy. Oh no, wait, they're either restricted or they're just going to sign an extension before then anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not nearly as deep as it looks. So it will be interesting
Yeah,
to see if they do that.
Even on the limited extension rules, to your point,
Yeah.
right now we see that happen. Look at Bogdan Bogdanovic. He would have probably been somewhere in the 15 to 20 range among all available free agents. Gives you a sense of this is not exactly a blockbuster free agent class. And now he's off the table, right? He's not going to be a free agent. So, there's definitely, a factor there for sure of, this is extension rules are limiting for the best of the best, highest paid, max level guys who aren't already on a max level contract. So, we'll see, where it all goes from here. There's talks of in the CBA, maybe it goes up to 150%. Maybe there's some other qualifiers of you got to be with the same team. There's a lot of different stuff out there, and we don't know yet, so it's not worth spending a ton of time on. But it could be a playing field leveler if a handful of these guys becomes a more enticing path forward.
Well, and I want to finish on Jaylen Brown with this before we move on to the next topic here. I tend to give players not necessarily a complete pass, or I don't just ignore or anything like that, but I try to sympathize with the fact that questions about their future with any particular franchise are extremely difficult questions to answer. And just in terms of, even if we're just talking about playing the PR game, it is so easy to get tripped up with that kind of question. It's part of why players don't like getting asked those questions. And part of it also is they get asked them over and over. And if a guy's going to be a free agent, they get asked about it with every new city they come into. And so that gets frustrating. But also, like, if the question, because to Celtics fans, right, or to any fans of a player's incumbent team, if that player is asked about their future, the only answer those fans want to hear is, I want to be here and nowhere else. But from the player's perspective, if you say that and then the organization doesn't do right by you, or if things fall to pieces and you want to utilize your ability to go somewhere else, then you're a liar, right? Then it's back. Well, then why did you say you wanted to be here back then, right? Then it reflects negatively on you. And then on the flip side, if you don't give that concrete, I want to be here, period, commitment, if it's anything else, if there's any kind of wiggle room in there, people start talking about where your next landing spot is. And look, that's part of the game. We talk
that's
about
what my mentions are all day today. Are he gone, future, insert one of the other 29 teams. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. The only hope you have for this as a member, even of the media, is if it's a guy who's in the last year of his, let's say, I don't even want to give an example because it's just going to go badly.
Yeah.
Player is in the last year of his deal and he is 100% not staying wherever it is he is. And he's asked with weeks to go in the season. He's like, yeah, I'm out of here this summer. I am done. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm leaving town. Like, I'm gone. That's the only truly 100% take it to the bank answer you're going to get. And those are, we get one of those every decade.
Right.
Even the ones where the guy doesn't want to be somewhere anymore. It's still, you're still going to get either I don't want to focus on that, I'm focused on the season, or we'll talk
Right.
about that in July, or whatever. But every once in a while we get I'm out of here, and that. So, or like we said, you take the money and then you tweet, I don't want to be here anymore because you're at the hair salon, like Eric Bledsoe did.
Yeah, or you can go that route. And look, I don't necessarily fault like part of the reason why the NBA is a 365-day a year league is because of the transaction game and because of player
Yep.
movement and because of all that kind of stuff. It's part of the reason why we have this show. So I'm not trying to speak ill of all
Sure.
of that kind of stuff. It's just reality. It's a very difficult question for players to answer, and one wrong word in there can trip you up and it becomes a big deal. So it's tough. And so
Yeah.
I'm not
And
gonna
you and
hold
I
it against
exist
guys.
in a realistic world of, I don't blame players for asking for trades, and I don't blame teams for trading players.
Yeah.
Everybody signs those contracts going in knowing it's loyalty is a two-way street, and instead in the NBA it works like two one-way streets running, parallel to each other. Like that's, your paths are together for as long as they're together, and that's just how it is in this league. I don't worry too much about any of that stuff.
I forget what the exact. I'll paraphrase Dwight Schrute when he says something to the effect of, "I think my greatest strength is loyalty. It's part of what they're paying me for. But if another company values that loyalty more, then that's where
Yes.
I'll go."
Yep. It's so true. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Okay, let's get into some other stuff here. Lonzo Ball does ultimately have surgery. We are expecting this to keep him out all of next season. I haven't seen it. It's not like official. I guess they'll see how his recovery goes, but I'm anticipating he'll miss all of next season. Number one, I hope this allows him to return to normal function just in everyday life. I don't like hearing those reports about like he's not doing well going upstairs and stuff like that. For a
Mhm.
guy who's in his mid 20s, like that's not ideal. Let me complain about my knee hurting from climbing upstairs and stuff like that. That should not be something Lonzo is having to deal with right now. And then after that, after you check that box, let's see if they can get Lonzo back on the basketball court season after next and go from there and see if he can resume his career.
Yeah, and a cartilage transplant now that's fully come out. That's basically take cartilage out of a cadaver and put it into him. And it was basically left as, this is the shot to try to save his career. And there were three other players, I believe, who've had this. I'll have to look up who they were. I know one of them was Jordan Adams, whose career effectively ended pretty early on, but could never really get back to playing at a level. So, but that gives you a sense of where this was at for Lonzo, how bad it had become, how bad the pain was, and all that. And, I don't worry about him as far as financially, because all
Right.
accounts are he's done very well with his money. He's been a pretty smart kid with stuff like that. But yeah, it's just, at some point it's, let's lead a pain-free life, right? Like, let's be able to do stuff, especially at, such a young age and those kind of things. So, and then the basketball, hopefully, obviously, we hope that he gets to a point where he can play again. But the Bulls, my guess is they're going to go into, I think Billy Donovan said we're going to prepare at training camp as if we won't have him for training camp. Every other report that's out there, and of course the Bulls aren't going to say he's out for the year yet, but he's probably not playing next year. And you'll know if they file at the beginning of the league year for a disabled player exception, so they can have that to sign a player with. We'll know right then that they're planning he won't be around this season, coming
Exactly.
season.
Uh, Meanwhile, his brother LaMelo is aiming to be ready at the start of training camp for the Hornets.
Yeah.
Will he have a new, very, very, very tall teammate? Well, the draft lottery will determine that. But LaMelo at least sounds like he should be back for the start of next season, which is great news for Charlotte.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. They asked him, like, do you think you would wear ankle braces like Steph Curry did for a while to avoid, some of the ankle issues that he's had this year? And he didn't rule it out. So to me, that basically says, yeah, we'll see. And my guess is it'll probably be something as he's rehabbing and working out over the summer. He'll probably try it and see how comfortable he can be with it, and then kind of go from there. But at least that's good news, for the Ball family is, one of the two looks like he'll be ready to go at the start of next season.
And last thing, Kyrie Irving's in a walking boot, dealing with that sore foot, but that doesn't necessarily, it's more of a protective thing than he has to wear this. It's just to protect it, which we do see more. It's a more common thing now. People see a player in a walking boot and they're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. This
Yeah.
guy's going to be out for weeks. That isn't always, sometimes they're used just as a protective thing. And that's about it. And so that's the case here. But just something to keep an eye on here with Kyrie and his ailing foot, as the Mavs are still waiting to get Luka back in action.
Yeah, and that's it too. I believe I'm trying to find it and struggling to find the actual tweet on it, but I believe it's him and here it is. Him and Luca are questionable for tomorrow's game against the Warriors, which is pretty massive game for those two teams. Is that they're basically right next to each other. They are. The Warriors are 37 and 36, Mavs 36 and 36. So that just again, I know we said it earlier, but that's just ridiculous, like compactness in the Western Conference is like crazy. Of like, and it's funny because I was talking with a friend of mine, and he goes, it's crazy. He goes, but we're not exactly talking about like the 48 win Suns missing out on a playoff spot here. Like these are 500 teams, but it's still it doesn't matter as far as the way these guys are positioning for seeds and fighting for position and all that stuff. These teams are all right into it. And then just while we were recording, the Timberwolves officially Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns questionable for tomorrow. So that's kind of like the plus side of this is, well, once they upgrade the guys, that's generally a sign they're probably coming back soon.
Yeah. Yep. So they may be back in action as soon as tomorrow. We'll see.
Yep. Be great.
All right. I think that about wraps things up for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, make sure you do subscribe over on YouTube as well as on the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.